To welcome you to this special Valentine's Day reading with the legendary Kate Braverman. She's the author of many vital and important and enduring books, including Lithium for Medea, The Incantation of Free Decay, Small Craft Warnings, Palm Latitudes, Squandering the Blue, among many, many other books. But we're here today to celebrate her latest book, Frantic Transmissions to and from Los Angeles, just out from Grey Wolf Press. And I'd like to thank everyone at Grey Wolf for their help to me in what was a very exciting and kind of challenging opportunity. Because I think, as most of the people in this room know, for this year and for the next 2 years, I'll be judging this annual nonfiction book contest at Grey Wolf. And to my great pleasure, we've committed ourselves to focusing on books that really are not in the literary mainstream of nonfiction, but come to us from a tradition that I see as going all the way back to the 17th century of writers like Thomas Browne, or in the 18th century like Daniel Defoe, of a vital experimental tradition in nonfiction that's willing to take on anything in language that's exciting as our strongest and most vital fiction and poetry. And Kate Braverman's book is certainly that. And I thought, as a way into tonight, I would read, I guess, roughly sort of half of the introduction, and then welcome Kate. Frantic Transmissions is foremost a narrative inspirited by space, an anatomy, as it were, of spaces and psyches. Let me propose a miniature tour of some of the spaces and psyches inside. 40 years after their first exposure to the Santa Monica Pier, 3 women continued to meet up there, quote, at irregular intervals: a birth, a death, a daughter's medical school graduation, or a chance airline confusion. The women bear witness, yet the pier, much as their voices joined in song, is only another of LA's transitory architectures. An uncle remembers the Jewish villages of Eastern Europe, the tenements of the old East Village. You might call them pre-Holocaust survivors, as Uncle Irving mordantly tags his family. Various women tumble into the, quote, limbo of half-lives. Others, luckier or cannier, vanish. The difference, quote, after you have vanished, after you have disappeared, after you have found an appropriate and untraceable sublife, you hear what harbors are saying. A mother and daughter jar applesauce in the kitchen of a farmhouse in the Allegheny Mountains of western New York. Quote, the appeal of this house, the mother guesses, is that it can't be conventionalized or made more like Los Angeles, not unless we gut and rebuild it. During a posthumous interview, Marilyn Monroe reveals that, quote, Los Angeles reminds me of children in foster homes at nightfall when they take their clothes off. An aunt orders her niece, the flower child with the poetry books, to go away, leave her alone. Remember, Aunt Sarah says, you don't have my address. A real estate agent showing that New York State farmhouse informs potential purchasers. As I mentioned, our sellers are from Los Angeles. During their years of transition from the accumulated atrocities of Southern California, they came to understand by seasons, by increments of wind howl and fox mew, that the event horizon landscapes they had internalized are permanent. Space is the most dramatic, stylistic entity, from Giotto to Nolan, from Intolerance to Weekend, as film critic and painter Manny Farber once observed. How an artist deploys his space, or her space, since the radial spaces of Braverman's visionary, devastating book are created or deflected, inherited or disowned, mostly by women. Few books prove as sly and resourceful in their memorials of contemporary space, address books and lost childhoods, as well as coasts, farms, and shopping malls. Much as few writers manifest Braverman's vigilance to transience, transformation, and repetition, to the confluences and abrasions of spaces and psyches. A memoir, essays. Kate Braverman is a legendary novelist, short story writer, and poet. But this book reminds us that nonfiction must be at least as daring and innovative as our strongest poems and novels. I'm honored to introduce Frantic Transmissions as the first recipient of the Grey Wolf Press Nonfiction Prize. So please join me in welcoming Kate Braverman.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to be here. How many of you are writing students? Well, I would like to just read a little bit from this book and talk about how I did it. Because you are writing students, one of my favorite things is to interact with you about how to do it. It is all done with strings and mirrors, and I happen to have almost every string and every mirror in my briefcase. So I know how to do it, and I know how to explain how to do it. Now, this is a section of the book. Has anyone read this book? Dr. Goldstein has read this book. Now, this was, maybe I'll start with an example of writing stand-up comedy has been something that's been interesting to me to try to do, because the page is, of course, different than anything. The page is an indigenous kingdom, unique unto itself. It is not the stage. It is not TV. It is its own universe. And I felt that some of this needed to be told as outright comedy, as outright black comedy. So this is Escaping Los Angeles, Uncle Irving's advice. My group was profoundly ignorant. These people hadn't mastered addition or subtraction, quantum mechanics and the subconscious. My people didn't even know where the Danube was. Those Chagall paintings of Jewish villages, men with beards and blue violins, snow enameling domed churches, the woman on a bridge with a hat and rouged lips, her mouth promising to taste of onions and blueberries. You know the canvases I mean? The rustic table with a flowered cloth and a glazed bowl containing 2 bananas like mated canaries. Spasms of rain falling like an inverted ocean on the sable-haired young wife. The one who looks like she's planning to change her name to Katrina, drink absinthe, be unfaithful, read smuggled novels in French and run away to Vienna. And the lovers holding hands, floating between spires. Well, Chagall left my people out of his paintings. You know artists, they're sensitive. They revise, they edit. My relatives didn't know physics or anatomy. They knew the ground was hard, and finding a ditch with a turnip in it was a party. My people were the ones hanging the goat upside down the bloody wooden bucket. Chagall painted the goat instead of them. My grandparents were in the hovel eating month-old borscht, air stained from nicotine, urine, and kerosene. Or maybe they didn't stay in the village long enough for Chagall to paint. They were lurching between cataclysms. The baker said they soiled his scissors with lice. Should be barber. The baker wouldn't give them credit. Even the rabbi wouldn't visit. He claimed he had priorities and they gave him migraines. They couldn't learn geometry, how to swim, or stop at red lights. It wasn't a family tree. It was a thorn bush. Eventually, they found a place to sleep and cook cabbage. It took generation. When they were convinced the Cossacks and Nazis weren't coming immediately, they began to relax and enjoy themselves. They even thought in terms of recreation. In our family, cigarettes were a hobby. Surviving long enough to get lung cancer was an achievement. Heart attacks were our other recreational activity. Of course, that's a more skilled endeavor. Lung cancer, you know what to do. You just keep buying cartons of Lucky Strikes and matches, and you engage in continual acts of flame, breath, and nicotine. It's what we call Jewish yoga. Okay, so I would like to talk a little bit about what's going on in this piece. Would anyone have any questions? Because what I'm here to do is tell you how I do what I do. So I would welcome that. You are writers.
Well, in the opening, which I have read, which actually Robert had us read for class, what brought on for you the idea of doing it in the third person? Because as we talked about, how it gives this sense of almost divinity. What? First person. I'm sorry, first person. I'm like, I need a little grammar work. But we talked about the effects that it created, and that kind of distance, and while at the same time giving the details of what was going on, this sort of almost choral sense.
These are collective voices, and this book came out in a multiplicity of different voices, which is unusual for me. This whole book has been a great experiment, and it's one reason why I encourage everyone, when I'm teaching my students, I encourage them to experiment. I learned a lot of this from my husband, who is a scientist, that too many of the writers I work with have the idea, yes, I'm going to get my perfect story today or this week, rather than having the idea, when a scientist goes in to work on something, it's an experiment, and you hope that you will get some information, some incremental information, rather than that you're going to get the third law of thermodynamics that afternoon, And I like to have a totally experimental approach to what I write. I have no idea when I start writing what it's going to be. It's a completely organic process. Yes?
When you switch to the second person where you say, you know the canvas, the Cheval canvas, I was curious as to what your strategy was there. You kind of set up a list of sort of, artistic or aesthetic observations, and then you kind of undercut it in the second half of what you read by saying, remind people part of that. What was your strategy there? What were you trying to do?
Going into that you voice is just how I write, and it's sort of how I write all my books. That I like drifting into a kind of collective voice sometimes, and you can, the difference of one word between you, we, I, just the difference of what one word will do. And I just thought that there are so many great exercises in this little piece, and I happen to love this giving something spin, giving it attitude. To say what it is or describe what it is, to me, is not as interesting as taking another step and giving it what I call spin or attitude. And with the Chagall paintings, one exercise I do with my students is to take a painting. Everyone, I expect, knows a Chagall painting, or think of some other famous painting like Matisse, Woman on the Rug, the geometric rug. and tell me everything that isn't in that painting. You know, what is that woman thinking? What time of day is it? What can she hear? What's going on in the next room? Because as the writer, you are not only the actress and the screenwriter and the director, you are the sound, the audio, the soundtrack, you're the lighting design, you're the props. And what I like to concentrate on are the other sensory information that you can impart. And if you ever have writer's block, just do exercises. And I wish that the first 6 or 7 years of my apprenticeship as a writer, I had spent more time not trying to write stories or novels, but just doing exercises. You take any Diane Arbus photograph and give yourself 20 pages to write about it. Take any painting that seems to suggest a narrative and you put it in. What isn't in the painting? Well, it's because we live in such a visual society that I think that what we want to do, what I want to do on the page and what I want my students to do on the page is not tell me how things look, because you can do that in a movie. The page, to me, is about what you cannot do in a movie. Disclose the interior monologue, the associations, thought, how things smell, how things sound, and it's taking that extra step. And that's why I like the Chagall descriptions, particularly of the woman on a bridge with a hat and rouged lips. Now, at any second, you, the writer, have an opportunity to do anything. And to take a step there and say, her mouth promising to taste of onions and blueberries. That the combination of things that you invent to say what the mouth would taste like. One way you can get this is a great exercise that I use with all my students, which is where you ordinarily put in a period. Don't do that. You put in a comma and you keep going. And it's like walking the plank into the great nothing, and that's where the alchemy is. So, you can always go back and punctuate, that's no big deal. But why don't you just, as an exercise, my students know this exercise, and it's just you start your sentence, the phone rang. And instead of answering it, the phone rang, and it sounded like 10,000 enraged swans, starving, banging their bloody heads against, the door, comma. You don't do the expected. When the phone rings, you don't answer it. Consider your other options of what would be more interesting. And another example of this would be the sable hair young wife. And then to insert yourself, you own the entire page. It is all permissible on the page. And to take a step into saying that the young-haired wife, actually, I'm on page 56, the one who looks like she's planning to change her name to Katrina, drink absinthe, be unfaithful, read smuggled novels in French and run away to Vienna. You see, you have an option of taking what's on the page and spinning it any way you want. And I just want to give you a sense of how to do it. I'll pick up another section now and talk some more about. This is somewhere in here. I like this section also. It's called The Collective Voice of Los Angeles Speaks, Marilyn Monroe. And it's done as a Q&A, and I must tell you that Q&A is such a great exercise and way to write, because what you can do is you just go back and get rid of the questions, you know. And so you can ask yourself the questions, answer them, and you'll find yourself engaged in an interior monologue that will be interesting. And just to understand that what's written, you know, is meant to be revised, and that if it helps to write it by putting in scaffolding, you can always, you know, plaster and paint over it later. You know, you can get the right wallpaper later. That's not the issue. The issue is to get the alchemy of it. So I have no interest whatsoever in pop culture, and Marilyn Monroe is someone who does not interest me at all. And having written a book about Frida Kahlo, which was, it seemed to me on the surface to be a perfect vehicle for me, Frida Kahlo, as a tormented artist in both physical and emotional pain, a great artist, and a communist, a bisexual, morphine addict. I felt we had a great deal in common. And I actually found Frida to be impossible to work with. I just really could not work with her. So as a continuing experiment, and I'm going to go on with this, I think what is interesting in this imaginary Q&A, well, let's see. Question: what do you think of Los Angeles? Answer: Los Angeles has a rancid gleam like spoiled lemons. It coats everything in a sort of bad childhood waxy veneer flashback. It smells of ash and August, when oranges bulge in alleys. You're hungry, you want to eat them, but they stick in your mouth and make you thirsty. Sun laminates you like photographs stuck between cellophane. Take the next step. Put the imaginary comma in, and you come up with, people keep cemeteries in scrapbooks. Little prisons they show to strangers. The images are indistinct and greasy. They could be anyone. You could buy them in a thrift store for $1 and pretend they're your relatives. Los Angeles reminds me of children in foster homes at nightfall when they take their clothes off. Things with ropes and pieces of metal are done to them and added on garages, with the freeway rushing in the background like a cheap soundtrack. It's in sync, but it has no meaning. Question: is there more to this yellow? Did it inspire you to become a platinum blonde? Answer: it's not platinum, which suggests constellations and redemption. It's another yellow entirely, asthma yellow. It comes from rotting petals and camera flashes that permanently scar your face. It leaks from clusters of stucco that remind me of blisters and lumps you get on your lips from kissing the wrong people. Question: also, notice the interplay. This woman is emotionally hemorrhaging, and the sense of it is the collective hemorrhage of multitudes and the superficiality with which culture deals with them. And while this woman, I think it should be clear, is having a psychotic breakdown and is being asked questions that do not relate at all to what she is saying. So from this we get the next question I'll do. Question. It's been said that you are an example of the new phenomenon of personal history fusing with the sanctity of fame, gathering a critical mass, and actually transforming public act. Are we really seeing you through biography? Answer. I have no idea what you're talking about. Question. What's your secret? Answer. The divinity of accident. You take a bus to Hollywood and become a star. Anyone can do this. You don't have to be born a countess or go to Columbia. There's a truth beyond. It's all a stained yellow lie. How to stay thin, get pills for insomnia and nerves, how to buy remedies at truck stops and under bridges. You learn illicit dialects and how to gesture with your fingers. The cinema teaches you. Then you get money. Your alias becomes permanent. You forget your hometown, and it forgets you. Question. Tell me about your shoes. You know, this should be funny. Answer. They clack on pavement, stilettos, yes, like a confusion of asphalt and thunder. They're shoes to kneel in. In this town, you open your mouth and prayer goes down your throat and you don't gag. You learn to vomit and smile simultaneously. Question. They say you are often late on the set. Is this true? They give me a script like they're doing me a favor. I'm the broad in the piece. I'm not satisfied. I want answers. I want to know why they invented rituals, calendars, and machine guns. But the scripts are always the same. Mouth to okra mouth. Call me dog and I bark. Wrap me in rags and tell me I'm beautiful. I'd like to tell them a few things. There is cinnamon in the well. Small cities float at the edge. It's a day to bathe an almond. Then they say I'm late. Everyone is waiting, staring at me, angry. I'm astonished. I don't even know these people. Question. Has love proved to be a disappointment? Love is a form of contagion. The concubine knows, rinsing ginger from her hair on stalled afternoons elongated like a woman in her 8th year of marriage or a coma. You get trapped in amber. It's important to be backlit and electric. I eat light bulbs that sting. It's an interior tattoo, a roadmap to where I really live, strangling in static salt breeze with too much wind and not enough skirt. You meet someone, and it's not a night or a season. It's a felony. I like this. Question. What do you think about the form versus content dialogue? Answer. When you are damaged and hungry, when you cannot separate yourself from the landscape or know where concrete sun-gutted alleys end and your illusionary flesh begins, distinctions collapse. Day is the texture of aluminum. You open your mouth and breathe in tin, and your lips bleed. When you know your name is an act of fraud, your body sculpted by truck driver speed, you blow the costume designer's boyfriend for. It's the end of words. Form, content. Is that a game they play at dinner parties? There is a vast conspiracy of hierarchy and privilege. I've observed this. Entire vocabularies, tables of elements, formulas. I'm unprepared. Each moment has complexities you need a calculator for. Let them go to the moon. Build a Bloomingdale's on Pluto. The radio will still burn my ears. I'll still have to show my breasts. Sad moons, so tired. It's an inexorable fact, like the weather. Men who drink too much and punch you. The rent that gets raised. Cars that break. Sons who disappear while you stand at a window in a rusty dusk, half convinced you're about to jump. There is no content. I am pure form incarnate. Is that the answer you want? Question. Are you concerned by the rumor that the studio may not renew your contract? Listen. Arson is a form of love. It's a shaping tool like a kitchen knife or a fountain pen you sign autographs with. The forest, like the heart, is outlined in neon and flame, not an organ, but a peninsula with harbor, history, bells. Then night comes with ambulances and the moans from multitude of cumulative betrayals. Being fired from the job and divorced is the least of it. Question. Can you give me your version of what happened yesterday for the record? Answer. I stood on the set and could not move. I was like a prop, a costume, a breakaway bottle. I couldn't determine what the room was supposed to be. Walls were the texture of hypnosis. It wasn't somnambulism, but something strange and abrasive, like walking in your sleep and drowning. My throat hurt. I refused to speak when they gave me my cue. My mouth was numb and scratched. I felt glassy, intoxicated by the fragrances of the set lights, the deliberate architecture of glare. I thought about miniature insects trapped in amber. That's what movies are. I felt the sticky glue of it on my legs. If I moved, I'd fall down. Stalling is also a direction, a way to drown, standing up. Outside was an afternoon of burning women. I was going to name my daughter with words that sounded like bells and winter rain. The name was growing in my mouth, fists of plum in my throat. I closed my eyes. Then the man from the magazine asked me, "Do you trade in pretenses? Is deceit another tool, like lipstick and a compass? Do you think you're an icon? Does that provide a justification? Do you believe mythology is forgiveness?" I looked at him and began screaming. Okay, that is a compendium filled with tricks, and I would be happy to share any of these tricks with you. How do you do it? Okay.
Is that a real interview with Marilyn Monroe?
It was a very interesting experience to pick a figure that I felt I had nothing in common with and find her so malleable. And ordinarily, I would have done that Frida Kahlo book because I wouldn't have worked from the outside in, because I normally work from the inside out. And so that was an experiment that I found the Frida Kahlo book extremely difficult. And but I could have gone on with this Q&A as a writing tool indefinitely. And the interesting writing in there is, if you notice, it's taking that next step. You know, when she says, first of all, there's a line in there when she says she can't move on the set, that she's intoxicated by the fragrances of the set light. And then I put in the imaginary comma or real comma and take another step beyond that and say it's the deliberate architecture of glare. So out of a light, I've given it a smell, I've given it a fragrance that's intoxicating, and I've said that beyond that, it is an architecture of glare, you know. And you get that kind of writing by continuing to consider the implications. Yes, I really welcome questions. I love you MFA students. You are the people that read me and study me and keep me in print since Lithium for Medea, my first novel in 1979. And most of you, I'm sure, have read at least one of my stories, probably Tall Tales from the Mekong Delta or Pagan Night, two of the very widely anthologized of my short stories. And so this is a compendium of 30 years of tricks in this book, at which I am not a generous person by nature at all, but I have a great generosity in terms of what I know about writing, and I do love to share that. So whatever I can tell you, I wish to tell you. I am here to tell you all, tell you all. What's that from? That line. It's a line from Plath, who is my favorite poet, one of my favorite poets. Yes?
Well, in working with this kind of thing where you kind of spin out and spin out and spin out, if you are, as I am a writer who could spin out forever and completely lose track of where it was I was going in the first place, how do you sort of keep an eye on that? Do you just follow your instinct and the rhythm in your head and just realize, do you just go that way, or do you have a means also for making sure that everything that you're doing spinning out this way kind of comes back in and
Okay.
keeps us going with you?
Okay. I think that what I encourage my writers to do, my advice is keep spinning. Get out as far as you can. That's why we have the comma, 20 pages with just a comma. You know, you can't end that thought. It has to go beyond into something else. I only took 2 classes from John Recchi, and in the second class he said something that I found profound. And he said, if you must veer on the side of economy or excess, go for the excess. Because you can always edit. You can always take out what's there. But what you can't do is put the blood work in. And the way you get that blood work is by writing what you don't know. And one of the best ways to do that is to force yourself to say a lot more about what you were talking about. That's how you give it attitude. That's how you give it gravitas. That's how you give it a sense of grandeur, cumulatively. And I would like to say that I write incantory prose. It's meant to be read out loud. I write every single sentence out loud. There are several reasons for that. Do you all write out loud? Do you say it out loud as you write? Okay, I have a sort of never and a sort of sometimes, and people who haven't decided how to vote on this issue yet. So let me help you. If you're not saying it out loud, you are not inhabiting the page fully. In your repertoire as writers, if you write for sound and rhythm, instead of just for what your eye will tell you that a grammatically right sentence is okay. But when you say it out loud, you start working with sound and rhythm. And your eye, first of all, there is no way to write dialogue without saying it out loud. And I'm basically a poet who can write dialogue. And dialogue is never grammatically correct. In real life we say, did you wake up on time, and did you get your suit ready, and where are the cufflinks, and do you want orange juice? And I mean, you couldn't read anything like that. Overslept again. Give it attitude. What I like to do with my students is, it's not enough that it be there. It has to be there with attitude. It has to make a statement, everything. Now, writing for sound is very interesting because your eye will lead you naturally to the next thought or association. When you write for sound, an entire substrata of possibilities opens to you, so that you're not writing from an idea that is obvious, because that line as written flat on the page would lead you to that. But when you write for sound, you open up your palette and you write one sound will lead you to another sound, another word, okay? And how far along are you people in your writing? You're all MFA students, so you've had at least 4 years of writing already? You just the college, and now you're starting to become writers at this stage. Okay, well, I know so many things I could tell you, but I really welcome Q&A. Yes.
I have a question about the 911 case. When I was listening to you, it seemed to me that
Can everyone hear him? Okay.
it seemed to me when you were reading it that what I was hearing was structurally the question, and then basically a list as a form, a list of thought and ideas. Most of them abstractions, or starting with a concrete image like the light and then abstracting it. That, as you were saying, when those images began to pile up, there began to be a grandeur to the thinking and the thoughts. Are you aware of that when you were doing it? And to me, it seems like I would like to hear you talk more about your life as a poet and how that carries over to prose. It seemed to me it was almost like listening to poetry.
It is poetry. And, I like something Gore Vidal said a couple of years ago. He said there is no poetry in America. It's all carefully deformed prose. And I have sat with the best of them, and with my eyes closed, if I did not see it as stanzas, to the eye, I would take it as prose. And with the best of them, I would take it as fantastic experimental prose. And so what I've done is I've carefully deformed my poetry to give the appearance of being something else. But basically I've been working on 3 poems for about 30 years now. One is The Some Women, which is a voice that I accidentally accessed. Too bad you missed our rock and roll show during the blizzard when we did the poems, but maybe we could come back and do them again. And we are going to be coming back and doing the poems and music. But what was the question?
Because when you talked about your relationship to poetry and how you sort of answered it.
I'm very concerned with the words, with having words as I move towards multiplicity of association. You know, you have a choice. I want to explain to you what you really have as writers, what your repertoire is, and how important sound is, how important rhythm is, how important writing for discovery is, and experimentation. And you cannot come up with the alchemy by writing what you already know. The alchemy comes from writing lines and pages that you have no idea you even knew that, or that it was possible to know that. And I also would like to give you a sense of the fact that there are always 2 stories, the one you want to tell and the accommodation that occurs with the page. Because the story that you want to tell and the accommodation that happens on the page are always different. And in 30 years, I've never been able to tell a story that I wanted to tell. It's a dance, and I think that is the great moment in writing. Is when the page, when you recognize that the page is not a flat surface that you can inflict yourself upon with your story or your great American novel or your new best American or whatever it is you think you're doing those first 10 years of your apprenticeship. And I would also like to say this to you as young writers, that being a professional writer is at least as serious a profession as being a doctor or a lawyer or an architect, that they don't turn those guys and gals loose with the scalpels and your flesh until you've spent like 8 years practicing, you know, in hospitals, the residency and the internship. There is so much preparation required for writing, and it requires huge amount of physical stamina for one thing. And I want to tell this particularly to my women, that writing is not a sedentary profession. It is incredibly hard, the hours that it takes, the stamina that it takes, and if it doesn't feel like you're giving the page 101% of yourself, more than you have, you're not working hard enough. And if you're wondering whether you should rewrite it, the answer is yes. There is no such thing as writing, only rewriting. And one of the things that I love about writing is when I crossed the bridge from thinking that rewriting was somehow tedious, and it came to me that in the rewrite is more interesting even than the first draft, because the rewriting for me is completely improvisational. Anything can happen. And I want to just try to give you the sense of letting anything happen. And the new class, the current class that I'm teaching is called Experimental Writing, Improvisation, and Related Outlaw Activities. And it has occurred to me recently, doing Q&As actually, that writing and crime really share a great deal in common. And I think that it's very important to tell all of my women, and in this politically correct, don't be rude society that we currently have, that writing, the page is not a flat surface. It is three-dimensional. And this in particular is the most collaged and sculptural of my books. My books have always been called painterly. This is really showing how the page is three-dimensional. Okay, stanzas, paragraphs, pieces, they're meant to be moved around. You know, I think that sometimes we think once it gets on the page, there it is and it's over. No, that is just the beginning. You know, that's like selecting your material. We're not even talking about styling it yet or sewing it or anything. That's just the material of it. So this stuff is meant to be moved around. I say everything out loud. When I was a baby writer, I became aware of words that are easy words, and for my students they're called banned words, and we, every time someone used them, they had to put a quarter in the bucket. For the 9-year private workshop I taught in Los Angeles, and you know, when you see that you're using really boring, childish words like big, little, old, you know, small, tiny. Just now think about what your choices are when you start to circle those words and replace them with better words, better sounding words that have more meaning installed within them already. As a post-historical citizen of post-history, ambiguity and multiplicity are the direction in which I want to move. Now, here's how it's like crime. The page is about what you can get away with. There are no rules. It's what plays. And you don't know until you begin interacting with materials. And I think that ways that it is like crime, first of all, it's an act of fraud. You know, all writing is a form of fraud. And what we do is, do we not transgress and where is Dr. Goldstein when I need him? Transgress and transpass? Just transgress, thank you. We break and enter, metaphorically, we break and enter. We autopsy the living and the dead. We have identity theft. We burglarize. We confess. We lie. You know, to be a good writer, I think that it's important to, for me it has been important to recognize and embrace my criminality and recognize that those are the methods by which I get the material that I need. And there's other metaphors that I have about what we do as crime and writing. And since we're all good people who are afraid of saying anything that's going to offend anybody or reveal anything about anyone, but that's all the interesting stuff, and you really shouldn't worry about it, because by the time you get it published, whoever you were writing about will be dead. And actually, once you bring the tools of art into what you're writing about, it will be unrecognizable because you will have entered into the dance with the page. And so what you began with is not what you end up with anyway. And so in real life, Mom, wore a terry cloth bathrobe from a Holiday Inn in Cleveland. Okay? How about if Mom, I remember her in the kimono printed with peonies and wisteria that she wore, with the sleeves like hungry birds skimming the water. And it was a bathrobe that she bought from a vendor in a village of a tributary of the Perfume River one summer when she was in China alone. You can have a terry cloth robe, but you can have a kimono, from a tributary of the Perfume River with cranes and peonies. Consider at every juncture that every possibility is open to you, and go out and get what isn't there. You're looking at your watch. Okay. So, I'm like a portable MASH unit at this point. Is anyone hemorrhaging? Does anyone need any triage of any kind? I have come quite a distance, and I would like to feel like I'm being of service here. Yes? It is one of my favorite books, and it is the 25th anniversary of Lithium for Medea. And for people who have shortlisted this, I understand there are 900 copies left in the country. So if you've shortlisted Lithium for Medea, I highly recommend that you get it up to the top of your shortlist, because it may soon not be available. And this is the 25th year, and I will be celebrating it all over the world. And I will be back in New York probably in September celebrating it. And I just had to read it for the French translation, so I hadn't read it in years, and I just was stunned by it. Who has read Lithium for Medea? Don't be shy. I'll do it again. Who's read Lithium for Medea? 3 people? It's a fabulous book. The gal is 27, and she starts shooting cocaine on page 1. And the book proceeds to get more exciting after that. So what is the question?
Well, it's really, the work is so dense, but yet it's so ambiguous. And I was wondering if you could remember what you were going through at that time and how the process was in terms of compiling it. Because it has, it's very expansive and poetic, but it has a really tight storyline as well. And characters are followed through really carefully, and I was wondering, in terms of your process, how did the drafts go? And the stance that you were saying about what you want it to be and what it actually comes out being, what was that like for this book?
I remember exactly how I wrote Lithium for Medea, because I've been going through the Turkish translation and the French translation, which are both coming really soon on me. So I've been engaged with that work. And it was my first novel. I wrote it when I was 27, and I had been only writing poetry since I got out of college. And so that would have been, I don't know, like six years of writing poetry. And to write that novel, I arbitrarily selected 14 poems that were written in the same voice, basically about the same thing, and they are the anchoring. That's the plot. I had 14 poems, and then I had to take the leap into the nothing of writing between the poems. And that's when I discovered I could write dialogue. And let me tell you all this. No writer has a full arsenal of weapons at their command. For instance, like, if you said to Garcia Marquez, give me a plausible woman, and you put a Glock at his head, one of my favorite writers, he could not do that. If you said to Philip Roth, one of my favorite writers, Glock up there, give me a landscape. You know, no writer has an arsenal of all the tools. And what you need to do, what I suggest you do, is A, come out of denial, identify what it is you naturally do well, identify what you don't do well, and you'll probably only have to learn one or two other things. I naturally, language is natural for me. Dialogue is natural for me. Plot, that is not in my repertoire. It's not something I do. And I have noticed that working with so very many young writers for so very many years, that there is this perverse desire to do what you don't do well. It's like, oh yeah, wow, my dialogue's great. Okay, I'll move on to landscape now, and which I've, or something else which they don't do well, and they keep working at that. It's like, oh yeah, well, dialogue, I've got that one knocked up. Forget about it. No, when you've identified what you do well, you want to make it a cornerstone of your work and avoid what you don't do well. If you can't write dialogues, don't have your characters talking a lot. There are strategies to writing, but first you have to really understand what is in your paint box there, what your palette is really composed of. And I highly suggest that you do what I did up through Palm Latitudes. I was still doing it, so I did it for a good 15 years probably. And that's that I just kept notebooks, those 3-hole punch notebooks in different colors, and there's sounds, there's smells, there's textures, and I never have writer's block, because I'll just do one of my student exercises, which is, like, we would sit around and light scented candles and have to write 20 pages. When you have to write 20 pages on how a vanilla candle smells, after 3 lines, you are forced to enter into a region you don't yet know if you write for discovery. And I'm trying to give you some ways, in this very fast little moment here, of how to do it.
How many drafts, when you were working on with him, as your, I know you were working on, what were the 4 points, one, and then how many times did you shift between the direction?
Once I selected the 14 poems which we have set music to, and which I like to do with the band, I found that for me, I don't keep a journal or a diary. That just writing as poetry is my natural form, and that a poem is like it's like a black star. It's so dense with meaning that when you unencrypt a poem, it actually turns into pages and pages. And another reason why just keeping books of work the same way a painter does. You go and you do sketches. You're blocked, your best American this year, story that you're working on, or your Carver story that you're working on. I think that my time would have been better spent just out doing 20 pages on random people. Airports are fabulous. There are many places where you can see people. And what I would use my notebooks for those first 15 years is that you learn to write to your strengths. So I never have a character walk to a window just to do it. I have them walk to a window so they can look out at poem in summer number 71, 149, 381, and stick them together. And for me, I've used poetry in all of my longer works because when you throw a poem in, it immediately brings up the level of the language and the sound and the possibility. Another great trick is take someone else's work that you love and just write around it. Because remember, you're going to be able to edit and you'll just take it out. And sometimes when I feel like my writing is getting flat, just start, and this is a great way to start also a piece. Take some favorite lines and just put them down and then force yourself to write between the great lines of someone else. And then you go back and get rid of their lines. There's a sense that using materials this way is somehow like cheating. And the page is about what you can get away with. It doesn't matter whether you have to do 100 drafts of something or how you get it. It only matters when it's finished, what it is. Some people think that, no, that would be wrong, like if I took a couple of stanzas from Plath and stuck it in the middle of my story. Well, it won't be. You'll get rid of those lines and it will bring up everything. So I hope that in those couple of examples from the book that I gave you, you could see how much I'm working on interior, on thinking. I work on all the things that you cannot do in a movie. What thought is, what free association is, how things smell. I keep a book of textures. Nothing is generic. In my exercises, we'd have to do 20 pages on, velvet, 20 pages on leather, 20 pages on wool. There is no such thing as hair. And as a writer, this is great. You get to go around and, say things like, can I touch your hair? And just say that you're going to go out and get descriptions. Everybody's hair feels completely different. Everyone's skin feels different. And if it doesn't, it's your job to make it different. Yes?
How many quarters did you collect, or what did you do with them?
We used it for food for the all-day workshops that we did. Yeah. So no, it was just like a, public humiliation kind of thing. Or it was more like, oh no, I can't believe I said big 4 times, God, on the same page. Because look at the difference. Like if you say something's old, what if you say it's derelict? What if you say it's abandoned? Instead of just saying that something's old, what about if it's discarded? You start to look for all the other ways you can say and bring in more implications. I mean, if something's just like old, that's one thing. But if it's derelict, it's wayward, it's delinquent, it's, I had lists taped to my wall for years of better words for saying all the things, the big, the little. Okay. So you need to, as a writer, you need to collect words, first of all. And you need to collect sounds and understand that a telephone is not as interesting a sound as a cathedral bell. And you want to fill your pages with beautiful sounds. And I don't think of myself as a writer as much as I do as a composer. Oh, surely I can tell you more. Or perhaps not. Yes?
I just have a question about the subject of the novel. It seems kind of interesting. What about Los Angeles made you feel like you really had to write the book? Like, was there something you knew about Los Angeles? Or did you live there?
Well, I did live there. Yes, it was my hometown. And I had a lot to say about it. And I've been saying a lot about it for 30 years. And I think I'm almost finished with Los Angeles. I'm now doing San Francisco. And yes, that's another thing. If you don't feel that what you're doing is shocking you, if you don't feel that what you're doing is discovering something you didn't know, maybe doing something wrong or forbidden or too revealing or too confessional, I'd say you're not working hard enough. And if there's any question of rewriting, the answer is rewrite. In the early days when I was a baby writer, I would do 60, 70 drafts of a story. That's what it takes. That's what it took me, and that's what it's taken the writers that I have had. That's what it takes in the beginning, and it should take that. And each draft should be addressing some of the issues that I've tried to bring up today. And it's a pleasure to be with MFA students. And I hope that you will continue to read me and really read Lithium for Medea, because it is such a fun book. She just lives on the Venice canals, and she's in love with a painter, and they're cocaine addicts, and it's a very powerful coming of age book, and it is you people who have kept it in print for 25 years. When you read it as MFA students, and then when you go and become teachers at universities and teach that book, and that's what keeps it alive. And thank you for having me here tonight. And if anyone wants to speak to me privately, I can do that as well. I can stay. Anyway, thanks a lot.
So let me thank Kate again for this extraordinary evening. Let me note that there are books for sale at the back of the room, and let's have another round of applause. Thank you.